We are living in a world today where the internal dialogue, the way you speak to yourself, shapes not only your mental health, but your entire biology. This isn't just psychological theory. This is grounded in the hard science of neuroplasticity. And one of the most powerful realizations you can come to is this: you are not your thoughts. You are the architect of your neural pathways. You are the one who either repeats a story of limitation or rewires your brain to build a story of expansion. Now, for a long time, people misunderstood the brain as something relatively fixed after early development. But modern neuroscience and decades of data show that the adult brain is malleable. It's plastic. That means you can sculpt it, you can train it. But here's the catch. It responds to repetition, emotion, and internal attention. That's the key to what I'm going to talk about today. If you talk to yourself with intentionality, consistency, and with strong emotional association for just 30 days, you can begin to fundamentally rewire how your brain processes self-worth, focus, and action. Let me start with something very simple, but extremely powerful. The thoughts you think are not random. They're patterns, they're loops, neural loops. They are reinforced over time by repetition and emotional tagging. If every time you fail, you say to yourself, I always mess things up, your brain literally forms a stronger and stronger association between failure and your identity, and that wiring becomes reflexive. You don't even think about it anymore. It becomes automatic. Now, that's the bad news, but here's the good news. You can interrupt those loops. And not only that, you can replace them with entirely new, more adaptive, more powerful circuits. Circuits that align with growth, resilience, and capability. But the first step is this: detach your identity from your thoughts. When you say, I am anxious, what you're doing neurologically is collapsing the distinction between the temporary state of your nervous system and the permanent structure of your identity. You're essentially programming your entire being to believe that anxiety is who you are, not just something you're experiencing. That's a mistake. It's a mistake on a biological level. What I want you to start saying and really practicing is this: I'm noticing the sensation of anxiety, or I'm experiencing a stress response right now. That sounds subtle, but it's not. You're creating a gap between stimulus and response, between biology and belief. And in that gap, you insert awareness, and that awareness allows for rewiring. So when I say you are not your thoughts, I mean that in the most literal neurological sense. Your thoughts are electrochemical patterns shaped by experience, often automated. But you, the conscious awareness, can change them. And one of the most effective ways to begin that change is through deliberate self-talk. Not the kind of fluffy affirmations that feel fake. I'm talking about strategic, focused language that directly influences the brain's predictive models. Let me explain that. Your brain doesn't just react to the world, it predicts it. It builds internal models of who you are and what to expect. If you constantly say, I can't focus, guess what your brain starts predicting? A lack of focus. Your brain sets your filters to match that internal narrative. Your reticular activating system, which is the part of the brainstem responsible for attention and awareness, begins tuning your perception to match that belief. If you think of yourself as lazy, your entire nervous system prepares for inertia. But if you start saying, even if it feels slightly uncomfortable at first, I am someone who follows through. I am someone who moves toward challenges. I am someone who finishes. Then the predictive model in your brain begins to adjust. Now, repetition is key here. Once, twice, 3 times. It's not enough. You need to flood your brain with the new input every single day for 30 days. Speak to yourself as if you are installing a new operating system. Because you are. This isn't magic. It's not mystical. It's neurobiology. Your neurons fire and wire based on what they experience most consistently in your inner voice. That dialogue you run in your head all day long is one of the most consistent stimuli your brain receives. That's why we start there. So for the next 30 days, I want you to talk to yourself, not based on how you feel, but based on what you are building. Say, I am not overwhelmed. I am organizing. Say, I am not weak. I am in the process of getting stronger. Say, I am not lost. I am recalibrating. Because when you do this, you're not lying to yourself. You're giving your brain a new direction. You're giving it structure. Let's break this down even further. When you talk to yourself, you engage your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, impulse control, and decision-making. But here's the fascinating part. When your internal dialogue is self-defeating or chaotic, it increases activity in the default mode network. That's the part of the brain involved in rumination, self-criticism, and even depressive loops. But when you use focused, intentional language, what I call high-agistic self-talk, you begin shifting activation away from the default mode network toward the task-positive network. That's the network responsible for goal-directed behavior, for action. So you're not just changing how you feel, you're changing what brain circuits dominate your daily experience. I want you to think about how athletes train. They don't just move their bodies, they prime their minds. High-level athletes don't wake up and say, I hope I feel motivated. They speak the performance into existence. They use self-talk as a tool. You could do the same thing. For example, instead of saying, I'm too tired, you say, my body is tired, but I have energy reserves I can tap into. That kind of language stimulates the anterior cingulate cortex, the part of the brain that helps regulate emotion and error detection. It helps you keep going when things get difficult. Now let's go deeper. Your self-talk also impacts the release of neurotransmitters. Positive, forward-focused language increases dopamine. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure, it's about motivation, reinforcement, and drive. When you say, I'm making progress, even if it's small, your brain gets a hit of dopamine. That reinforces the behavior, and if you repeat that every day for 30 days, you literally train your brain to crave momentum. You build what we call a positive feedback loop in the mesolimbic pathway. But the inverse is also true. If your self-talk is negative, catastrophic, or rooted in defeat, you increase cortisol, the stress hormone. You start activating the amygdala, which primes your brain for fear and withdrawal. Your hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for learning and memory, starts to shrink under chronic stress. And your ability to access the prefrontal cortex to make high-level decisions decreases. That's the cost of unchecked negative self-talk. That's why this matters. Now I want to talk about identity. Because the most powerful words you can say start with, I am. Your brain encodes identity statements very differently than general thoughts. When you say, I am disciplined, your brain begins to search for evidence to support that. It updates its model. But when you say, I am a mess, or I am a failure, you reinforce the exact circuits that keep you stuck. For 30 days, I want you to use identity-based self-talk that aligns with who you are becoming, not who you were. That means saying things like, I am capable of deep focus, even if your attention span has been struggling. Why? Because the brain doesn't change by accident. It changes by intention. And every time you say, I am, you are programming your subconscious to behave accordingly. That's the doorway to rewiring. Let me give you a specific protocol. Start each morning within 15 minutes of waking and look in the mirror. Not because of vanity, but because of visual anchoring. When you see yourself, you activate brain regions tied to self-awareness and social cognition. While looking into your own eyes, say 3 identity statements with emotion. Something like, I am focused, I am building mental strength, I am consistent. Repeat them with emphasis. Tone of voice matters. Emotion tags memory and makes the experience more neurologically sticky. Then, during the day, every time you catch a negative thought, don't just suppress it, replace it. Suppression increases the salience of that thought in your working memory. But redirection builds a new circuit. So when you catch yourself saying, I'm just not good at this, immediately say, I am learning rapidly, or I'm becoming proficient. This trains the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex to override the automatic response. With enough repetition, the override becomes the default. In the evening, do a quick reflection. Ask yourself, what did I say to myself today? Journal it if needed. Why? Because the act of writing activates the parietal lobe and makes the mental structure more concrete. You become more aware of your patterns. And awareness is the first step toward change. Now, let's address the common objection. People say, well, what if I don't believe the things I'm saying? That's a valid concern, but remember, belief follows repetition, not the other way around. You don't wait to believe to speak it. You speak it until your brain has no choice but to believe. That's neuroplasticity. That's the biology of becoming. And this brings us to the second critical principle. Speak victory even when you feel defeated. Let me be very clear here. Your nervous system is responsive to language. And language is one of the only tools we have that allows us to modulate state without changing our environment. If you're in a hard season of life, if you're exhausted, overwhelmed, anxious, your natural instinct is to speak from that state, to say, I can't, I'm broken, this is too much. But if you do that, you are reinforcing the very circuits that hold you there. You are embedding the stress response deeper into your identity. But, and this is important, you can speak from your desired state instead of your current one. That means even in fatigue, you say, I am resilient. Even in loss, you say, I am a learning strength. And when your nervous system hears that language consistently, it starts to re-regulate. It starts to create coherence between your brain and body, and coherence breeds momentum. This is not denial, this is discipline. You're not pretending that pain isn't real. You're choosing a narrative that allows you to grow through it. And neurologically, that distinction matters. It shifts you out of helplessness and into agency. It activates the medial prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for future planning and self-concept. Every time you speak victory, you're modulating your vagus nerve. That's the longest cranial nerve in the body, connecting your brain to your heart, lungs, and gut. It plays a massive role in emotional regulation. Positive self-talk lowers your heart rate, increases heart rate variability, and moves you into a parasympathetic state, the state of rest, recovery, and growth. That's where healing happens. That's where learning sticks. That's where transformation becomes possible. This is the science of self-talk. This is how you rewire your life from the inside out. Most people walk through life reacting. They react to their environment. They react to stress. They react to their emotions. And what they don't realize is that every reaction is being reinforced. Neurochemically, behaviorally, and psychologically. The brain doesn't just record what you do, it learns what to expect. And over time, your reactions become your personality. Your mood becomes your identity. But here's the truth. Just because something feels automatic doesn't mean it's permanent. Your habits of thought, your tendencies, your internal dialogue, those are all trainable. And the third step in rewiring yourself is learning to speak with authority to your own mind. Let me explain exactly what I mean by that. Most people think that thought comes first and then speech follows, but research shows something different. In many cases, when you engage in deliberate, commanding speech, even if your mind is cluttered, you can shift your neurochemistry. You can move out of a reactive state and into a regulated one. And when you do this consistently, especially over a 30-day period, you start to develop what I call internal leadership. That's when your conscious mind becomes the director of your nervous system, not its hostage. I want to talk about the voice you use when you speak to yourself under pressure. Most people don't even realize that their tone, yes, the tone they use with themselves, matters. When things go wrong, many people immediately default to language like, "this always happens," or "I knew I'd screw this up," or "I can't handle this." That tone activates the stress axis. The hypothalamus releases CRH, which stimulates the pituitary, to release ACTH, which signals the adrenal glands to flood your system with cortisol. And once that happens, your focus narrows, your prefrontal cortex goes offline, you can't solve the problem, you spiral. But if you catch it, if you intercept the pattern with forceful, self-directed speech, you can create a totally different response. You can literally halt the stress cascade and re-engage executive function. So instead of "I can't handle this," you say, "I am not letting this control me." You say, "I know exactly what to do next." Even if you don't fully believe it in the moment, your nervous system responds to that directive because language is embodied. It doesn't just exist in your mind. It influences your muscles, your breath, your heart rate. And that physiological shift gives you access to clarity. And this is why I tell people, don't just think positively. That's not enough. Speak assertively. Speak as if you're commanding your internal state, because in a very real sense, you are. The vagus nerve, which regulates your parasympathetic nervous system, responds to vocal tone. When you speak to yourself calmly but firmly, you activate vagal tone, which helps restore calm and increase resilience. But when you speak to yourself with panic or sarcasm or defeat, you activate the sympathetic nervous system, which accelerates stress and reduces cognitive flexibility. So I want you to practice this. When things get hard, when anxiety spikes, when doubt creeps in, don't just observe your thoughts. Direct them out loud if necessary. Say, "I'm trained for this. I'm not backing down." Say, "One step at a time. That's all I need right now." Say, "This is pressure, not danger. I know the difference." When you use language like this, you take the amygdala offline and bring the prefrontal cortex back into the driver's seat. You shift from reactivity to response. And the more often you do that, the more it becomes your baseline. This isn't about pretending things are easy. It's about asserting dominance over the one thing you can always control, your internal response. Because the fourth piece of this rewiring process is the most misunderstood of all. Self-talk isn't supposed to be soothing. It's supposed to be activating. It's not just about comfort, it's about direction. It's about arousal regulation. Let me go deeper on that. Your brain and body exist in a dynamic relationship of arousal. Arousal is not just sexual. It's a term we use in neuroscience to describe how activated or alert your system is. Low arousal can mean fatigue or depression. High arousal can mean anxiety or aggression. But here's the secret. Your words can shift your arousal level. That means if you're too amped up, you can talk yourself down. And if you're too shut down, you can talk yourself up. Let's say you're anxious before a presentation. Most people say to themselves, "Calm down, relax." But what that does is it creates an internal contradiction because your body's in a high arousal state, and now your brain is getting two opposing signals. That creates more tension. The better move is to say, "I'm excited." Why? Because excitement and anxiety have nearly identical physiological profiles. Elevated heart rate, increased respiration, sympathetic activation. But excitement has a positive valence. So when you reframe anxiety as excitement, you don't fight the arousal. You redirect it. That's what Navy SEALs do. That's what elite performers do. And it's what you can do too. On the flip side, when you're sluggish, when motivation is low, don't say, "I just can't today." That's a signal to your body to maintain the shutdown. Instead, you speak activation. You say, energy is rising. You say, I move before I feel ready. You say, I don't wait to feel motivated. I create it. That kind of language increases catecholamine release, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and that lifts arousal. It wakes up your system. That's the neurochemical reality. Your speech patterns are training your autonomic nervous system every single day. If you use passive, avoidant language, I hope I can get through this, maybe I'll try, we'll see what happens, you are programming low agency. You are reinforcing learned helplessness. But when you use commanding language, I will handle this, this is mine to solve, I decide how I show up, you stimulate an entirely different pattern of brain activity. You engage the medial prefrontal cortex and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which are involved in decision-making, future planning, and voluntary control. And here's something even more fascinating. There's research showing that when people use the third person in self-talk, especially under pressure, their performance improves. So instead of saying, I can do this, you say, you've got this, or even use your name. Sarah, you're built for this. Why does this work? Because it creates psychological distance. It allows you to coach yourself the way you would a friend or a teammate. And that distance reduces emotional reactivity while preserving motivation. I know this can sound a bit unnatural at first, but that's just because you haven't trained it. We spend years, even decades, learning how to speak to others, how to present ourselves socially, but we spend almost no time learning how to speak to ourselves strategically. That's a mistake. Because your inner voice is the single most powerful influence on your neurobiology outside of your direct environment. You live with it 24/7. And if that voice is chaotic, defeatist, or random, your physiology follows. But if that voice is structured, decisive, and aligned with action, your entire system begins to organize around it. Your goals become clearer, your focus sharpens, your resilience increases. And this isn't philosophy, this is grounded in decades of neuroscience and behavioral research. It's how you rewire. So here's what I want you to do. For the next 30 days, don't just let your thoughts wander. Speak to them, lead them. Create a morning protocol that includes 90 seconds of commanding language. Not affirmations, commands. Stand upright, shoulders back. Activate your body posture, because posture also informs the brain. And say something like, today I will direct my attention. Today I will not negotiate with doubt. Today I will execute on what I said I would do. You say it with intensity, with conviction, because your nervous system listens to conviction. It tunes itself to what it perceives as real. If you whisper half-heartedly, I guess I'll try to stay focused, your body doesn't respond. But if you speak with force, with structure, your vagus nerve, your reticular activating system, your basal ganglia, they all begin to engage with your mission. That's the physiology of commitment. And during the day, every time you hit a wall, whether it's emotional, physical, or mental, you don't give in. You engage. You say, this is resistance. It means I'm growing. You say, hard. It's not a stop sign, it's a signal to lean in. This kind of language activates neuroplasticity by combining challenge, attention, and emotional salience. That's the cocktail your brain needs to form new connections. Most people let discomfort dictate their self-talk, but you're going to reverse it. You're going to use your self-talk to regulate discomfort. And over time, what happens? Your tolerance for intensity increases. Your identity as someone who can self-regulate gets stronger. And that becomes who you are, not by accident, but by design. So when people ask me, how do I change? I tell them, you change by changing how you talk to yourself when it matters most. You change by using your voice as a tool, not just for communication, but for neural training. You change by realizing that every sentence you say internally is either wiring you toward resilience or wiring you toward retreat. There is no neutral. Every word is a signal. Every phrase is a command. And your brain is listening. That's how you start to take control of your biology. That's how you rewire yourself. By speaking like someone who has already become the person you're training to be. Not in the future, not someday, right now. Because the nervous system doesn't live in the future, it lives in the present. And what you say now, with intention and repetition, becomes who you are